Why do you think people are why don't they choose an attorney? Maybe because they don't know?
I think it's a number of factors. I think when people hear attorney, they hear expensive, they hear it's going to take forever. I don't want to deal with it. I want to move on from the claim. And that is the insurance company's strategy. There's a kind of a classic book in our industry called Delay, Deny, Defend. And it's a professor from the Northeast that studied this. And it is the litigation strategy of I'll string these people along, pay them a little bit of money so they can get going. They're not just completely furious with us, but enough money to maybe hire a contractor, put a roof on the property, get something going. And if they want to ask for more, just deny and say no more is owed. And if they go get a lawyer, we'll defend it and make them wait out another 2 years to get what they're owed. And that strategy permeates insurance from coast to coast.
Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall, where we throw ideas, see what sticks, and nurture those that do. I'm your host, Armando Leduc, an actor, entrepreneur, and coach, giving you insights that light up your world. We're here to explore the realms of business, marketing, and life, serving up a shot of inspiration with every episode. Ready to make ideas stick and grow them into something great? Let's dive in. All right, welcome to the show. Spaghetti on the Wall, back with another one. Raj Pandit over here in New Orleans, Louisiana, property and casualty attorney. We got to meet at the 8-figure firm mastermind, which was a lot of fun.
It was.
Yeah. How did you meet 8-figure firm, by the way?
That's a good question. I think it was just me doing my own research, just looking out there, seeing what companies are out there that can help us fill in the gaps that we may have, any blind spots that we may have. Saw some of their collateral, and I reached out to them and said, look, does it make sense? Does that relationship make sense? And it did at the time.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you still practicing law, or are you just more on the running the business side of things these days?
Well, I'm 15 years in, and so we've been at Pandit Law Firm for going on close to 11 years. And at this point, I'm focused on mostly managing the firm, but still involved in some of our biggest, most complex cases that where a lot of strategy is involved, that's what gets my juices flowing and where I think I add the most value. And so, yes and no, most of my day is built around running the firm, culture, driving, leadership, and business development.
You guys just strictly do property and casualty?
That's it. We don't touch any other kind of case.
I'm glad, right? Because I'm seeing some firms out here that are like, well, we do immigration and PI and family law and workers' comp. And, PI and workers' comp sounds good, but... And
if a hurricane comes through, all of a sudden they're hurricane lawyers.
Right.
That's right.
Tell me what, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs listen to this, so, and a lot of attorneys. Tell me why and what the benefit is of strict, like niching down the way you have.
Yeah, well, that really, you just nailed it, is finding what you like to do. I always call it an inch wide and a mile deep.
Right.
And in doing so, we can truly become experts at what we do. It is hard to be a master of many things. Usually you are not that. And here, wouldn't call ourselves masters. That's why they call it the practice of law. You're always learning something new. But by doing that, we've seen almost any type of scenario you can imagine in the first party world, property and casualty world, that when a client calls us or a potential client calls us, we can say, yes, we've handled this on numerous occasions. We've got active cases going on with your issue right now. And it creates confidence for the client and also allows us to be our best and provide the best service.
So how nuanced is it? And I'm sure it's super nuanced, but what's the difference between you guys handling a property and casualty case and then an attorney that has done property and casualty here and there? How does that translate in terms of what are they getting back and what the service is like?
Sure. I think experience matters in anything that you do. I always said, if I needed to, in a pinch, bake a cake, I'm no baker and not a great cook, but if I needed to bake a cake, I could probably make my way through it. If you ask me to bake 12 cakes at once, I'll probably burn the kitchen down. And that's just how it is. And the same thing here, if you've done a practice area or a case type, not dozens of times, not even hundreds of times, but genuinely thousands of times, you're going to be able to provide the highest quality legal service. And the same way, it's the reason that we decided to do that. If another case comes in the door, through experience we've learned, it's better to hand it to someone who truly is an expert in that particular case type so that we give the best value to the client. And I truly believe that that comes back full circle.
Your house was just crushed by a tree.
May 7th, yes, just a few weeks ago.
That's crazy. What's the story? Tell me the story.
It was a typical New Orleans rainstorm. Black clouds come rolling in. No schools are canceled. You're out your normal text alert you get from the city. Put your car in the median if you must. But so I thought nothing of it. Went to work, and at about 9:30 in the morning, my wife calls me and says, "Raj, it's raining in the kitchen." And I responded, "Raining what?" Not thinking that it's actually raining in our kitchen. And she's like, "Raining water. Raj, it is raining in our kitchen. We have a 2-story home." And I said, "Well, how is that possible? Did a pipe break? Did a toilet overflow? What's going on?" She's like, "I don't know, but the power's out." And I heard a big boom. And I said, "Well, go look and call me back." And I got a call, a minute later. And she said, "There's a tree through our house." And you could see from our hallway bathroom on the second floor, the sky and the rain coming through right through our hallway bath. My infant's bedroom is right next to it. Water's coming through his room and pouring into our kitchen. And we renovated our house in 2024, just less than a year ago, last summer.
Wow.
And so we tried to get it back in before the baby was born in September. And so we got in about 7 months ago, and we're back to renovating it again.
Dude.
This time not by choice.
That's so going through something like that. How do you think that that's going to affect how you move forward with your business and with your clients?
So we actually talked about that in the firm in these last couple of weeks. One of our core values is tenacity with compassion. What that means is we have to be tenacious in what we do, fighting insurance companies. But in doing so, we can sometimes be calloused or insensitive to what our clients are going through. And they're going through one of the most traumatic experiences of their life. Unlike a personal injury, which is personal to that person, they're dealing with that pain, that suffering, whatever it may be, but it's personal to them. Their family may be affected. Some of their work-life balance may be affected, but it's an internal thing. With your house being damaged here, with our house being 40% gutted all of a sudden with no warning, it causes trauma to the entire family. If there's a child who's in school, they may now, and they had a 15-minute car ride to school, they may now have a 30-minute car ride, depending on where you're living. All of a sudden, you're incurring a ton of expense. And there are so many other factors. And something like your house, for the vast majority of us, our home, of course, it is our home and is where we cherish our memories, but it's also most families' number one asset. And all of a sudden, the value of your asset that you've been paying a mortgage to for 5, 10, 20 years is in question. And there's uncertain times. And that brings tremendous stress into the family life. We've seen after hurricanes like, of course, Katrina and Gustav and most recently here, Zeta and Ida, stress levels go up, divorces go up, family issues go through the roof. We have kids, in therapy for PTSD, you name it, we've seen it. And I think that's sort of the untold stories of these events and why we say tenacity with compassion, because you don't know what that person is going through in their family. We're focused on our job, which is go get every dollar they're owed as quickly as possible. But in doing so, we have to do it compassionately so that they know, yes, we've hired the right law firm to go recover what we're owed, but they're also giving us an experience where they understand what we're going through and are making this difficult process as easy as it can be.
I have a tree in my backyard. If it falls on the neighbor's house, who's responsible?
We get this question a lot. Your insurance company, and let me say this more clearly, your neighbor's insurance company is going to step in and pay for the damage. You have insurance that's called first-party insurance. I have a loss to my house, and they got to pay for that damage. Now, that insurance company may want to, depending on certain facts, for example, has that tree been maintained? Has the neighbor warned you and said, look, this tree needs to get dealt with. It's hanging over our properties. It's it looks like it's about to tip over, and you don't do anything about it, then your insurance company may be on the hook. In our instance, but my neighbor and I said, look, this tree's hanging over. It's a 70-foot tall tree hanging over both of our properties. We had a tree guy come in and clean it up and prune it up and make it all nice. And so, and we shared that bill. And so if it would have fallen on his house, his insurance company would have paid for it. They may have sought some contribution from my insurance company, but we're not liable personally, or they're not going to come after us and try to recover anything personally from us for that. But notice matters and warnings matter. If someone's telling you that there's an issue with this tree and you don't do anything about it, that's a problem. Having said that, your neighbor is allowed to prune back or deal with any portion of a neighbor's tree that's over their property line. And so if they choose not to do so, that's not necessarily your fault.
Gotcha. Obviously you had no idea that this tree was going to fall.
No.
What did they say it was? Like, did it get struck by lightning
That's the theory that the insurance company believes right now. And my wife, who was in the house with our infant at the time, said that she saw lightning, heard thunder, and then the next thing you know, the tree falls and it sounds like, she said she felt like it was in an earthquake and the house shook. And so, yeah, there are two other giant 70-foot trees on either side of this tree, and they're fine. Not a leaf, not a branch has come off either of those trees. And so the only thing that makes sense is that it was hit by lightning. And also, of the 70 feet, there was about 18 feet of the trunk that was still standing. And it's just like it was like sliced at the 18-foot mark, and the other 50% or 50 feet rather landed on the house.
So it had to have been.
We think so.
I mean, what else?
Right.
Unless there's somebody out there with a chainsaw.
Exactly.
Crazy. So I have some questions for you because I want to ask
Sure.
some fun dopey stuff. What happens if your neighbor gets property damage during we're on St. Charles and there's a Mardi Gras float that comes by and there's damage to their property? Who's on the hook?
Yeah, if that tractor driver isn't looking or is sipping on something and drives right into your yard and hits your house, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your insurance company is I always tell people the first thing you do, and the first thing I did when our tree fell, is call the insurance company. This tree fell at 9:30. I was on the phone with the insurance company at 10:30. You waste no time. Call your insurance company. People always say, well, maybe it's someone else's fault. It doesn't matter. Start with your insurance company and go from there. So in this example, yeah, sure. If someone drove their Mardi Gras float into my yard and hit my house, they're going to have some liability here. But let your insurance company figure that out. They know you didn't do anything. You weren't driving the tractor. You weren't on the Mardi Gras float, let's hope, at least in this example. And so they're going to pay you. They're going to pay your contractor. They're going to pay whoever you need to get your house back to where it was before the event happened. Now, they may say, what parade was it? And their lawyers or their investigators may knock on that crew and say, hey, guys, who's your insurance company? Because this wasn't a tree falling on a house. This wasn't a fire. This was clearly your mistake. We're going to pay for it, but we're going to ask you to pay us back. And that's called subrogation. And that's a whole other area of law. We don't touch a subrogation claim, but where it's an insurance company seeking contribution from another insurance company. But yeah, always call your insurance company and let them figure it out for you.
So you guys exist when the insurance company wants to lowball you, or how does that? When should somebody call you?
So I tell everybody, let the insurance company do their job. We don't need to be your first call on like a personal injury matter where, the commercial says, call us immediately. My advice always is call your insurance company immediately. My hope is the insurance company comes out, sees your damage, cuts a check that allows your contractor, your repair person to put you back and make you whole. And you don't need our services if that's the case.
Right.
We're here, however, in the circumstances where that's not the case, where a tree falls on your house and your contractor says, look, we got to replace the roof. We got to, in our example, you need a whole new kitchen. The bathroom upstairs, the baby's room, all these rooms are gutted, need to get put back together, and it's going to cost you, pick a number, $300,000. Well, if the insurance company comes out and says, we see it, we value it at $100,000, your contractor is going to move on to the next job. Why? Because you don't have the money to complete the job, and they're not interested in coming and doing 30% of the work. And then you're unhappy, they're unhappy, and the insurance company is none the wiser. And so in that example, I tell people also, call your insurance company, tell them it's going to take more money, and let's see what they say. My hope again is they understand. They come out and say, we see the mistake. Here's additional money. Get your house fixed.
Right.
Unfortunately, too often they don't do that. And they will lowball someone and give them that. In my example, they need $300,000. They give them $100,000. You shouldn't have to liquidate savings, go into your 401k, go into your child's education fund, borrow money from a family member, get a home equity line of credit. You shouldn't have to do any of these things to just be made whole. That's the purpose of insurance, is to put you back to where you were the day before, or in my instance, the morning before you go off to work and that event happens that no one wants to have happen. But when that does happen, one thing that's great about Louisiana and several other states is there are statutes that exist. I call them consumer protection statutes, that exist to hold insurance companies accountable. Because, like I said, you shouldn't have to call me to get your just payment from the insurance company. So if you do have to call a law firm like ours, there are penalty statutes that say you owe 50% on top of what you should have paid, plus you need to pay the attorneys because they shouldn't have had to hire an attorney, plus you need to pay their costs that they incurred that they shouldn't have had to incur. Like, we'll have to hire an expert and do our own investigation. The insurance company should be liable for all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful those laws existed. They didn't really exist with these teeth for Katrina. And a lot of people got shortchanged, and the laws changed as a result of what went on in Katrina. And here we are almost 20 years later. Those laws have been very beneficial. Ida happens August 29th of 2021. Can't believe that's already been nearly 4 years ago. And it's that law in place that allowed firms like ours to hold insurance companies accountable when they don't pay what's owed.
100%. All right. So this is a good question. Hurricane season's here.
Yes.
And we're dealing with a lot of insurance companies pulling out, and I guess reinforcing roofs and stuff. Like,
that's right.
Where are we now with insurance and how they're, because like I said, they were pulling out, and is it getting better?
Yeah, that's we might need a whole podcast just on this topic. There is so much going on. There's a lot of commotion at the legislative level. The governor's involved, the commissioner of insurance involved. They're butting heads. Look, everyone wants as much coverage as they can for the most reasonable price.
Right.
When you have these loss events such as Ida or Zeta, Laura in Lake Charles, rates inevitably go up. Insurance companies realize they're just doled out billions of dollars. They'd like to recoup some of those profits. One way to do that quickly is to raise rates. Having said that, rates cannot become unaffordable, which is what they've become now. People that were paying $3,000 for insurance are paying $13,000 for insurance. People that were paying $6,000 for insurance are paying $18,000 for insurance. And that's residential. I've got commercial clients, and this is a true story. This one actually made the news. I had a client for a large apartment complex, was paying $80,000 prior to a hurricane for insurance, but it was affordable within their business.
Sure.
That $80,000 of insurance premium the next year went to $800,000.
What?
Making it impossible to do business. They were going to go bankrupt, to the point where this made it to the commissioner of insurance, his desk, and it was reviewed. And through creativity, we had to break up the LLC and break it up into numerous different subparts, and then present it that way to make it more palatable to an insurance company to write insurance for them. And they were able to get it for a substantially reduced price, still multiple times higher than the year before the hurricane.
Lord.
But forget about
Is that real? 800,000?
10x. And look, that's an extreme example. It is. But double in the commercial world, double is a good day. I've got a close friend who's got a beautiful home in a beautiful area of town. And he was paying about $22,000. This is before Ida, so call it the year of 2021. Filed a claim, had a large loss, water throughout his home, him and his family's home. The same insurance company presented a renewal in 2025 of $92,000 for a house. For a little bit more coverage, they valued the home at a greater amount. It was newly renovated because of Ida, but more than 4x a premium. To which he said, I can't pay this $90,000 in property tax and everything else.
Hell no. So what do?
They are going to Louisiana Citizens, trying to find a reduce, and now they have less coverage, which puts your property at risk. And look, the reality is, as I told this close personal friend, they just want you to go away. They want you to go shop and go get a new insurance company, but they don't want to just cancel you. It's one of these more respected insurance companies. They don't want to send you a cancellation notice, which is what they're really telling you, with a 4x premium.
Good Lord.
But yeah, and that's just one of dozens of stories that we've heard. You know, that's a more nuanced niche, higher end insurance company, but you know, the State Farms and the Allstates, doubling and tripling is not out of the question.
So it's not getting better.
It's not. And yeah, we're only seeing it go, it's going up despite the changes. They've changed some of the laws. They've taken some of the teeth out on the laws. And I think a lot of that is related to, look, good messaging from the insurance lobby. They say that it's the plaintiffs and the lawsuit abuse that's causing all this, but they don't have the data to back it up. Historically, and this goes back 2 decades, I'll ask you this question. If you had to guess, after Ida, what percentage of homeowners who had an Ida claim had to file a lawsuit to get, not had to, but chose to file a lawsuit to get the money that they were owed paid out of
the percentage?
The percentage.
I would venture to say it was probably pretty low. 15%?
15%. It's about 3%, 4%.
Wow. And
so there's this messaging that in your example, 15 out of 100 people had to file a lawsuit. No, or chose to file a lawsuit. 3%, 4%. That's historical averages.
Wow.
Sometimes it's as low as 2%. And so you get this, you think, some people have told me 30%, 20%. I've heard as high as 50% that people say. And you said it's got to be a super low number like 15. It's 80% less than that. 3% of people. That means 97 out of 100 don't call a lawyer and just accept whatever they got and move on with their life, even if it was underpaid, even if they needed significantly more money. And that's the part that's the part of the story that doesn't get told.
Yeah.
And I'll put some real numbers on it. There were about 440,000 Ida claims made. There were, 11, 12, 15,000 lawsuits filed. And so those numbers, think about it, 10% would be 40,000 lawsuits. Right. We're talking not even half of that number. So less than 5% filed lawsuits. And I wish that story got told more often than the story of lawsuit abuse and plaintiffs' lawyers.
Oh, totally.
Driving up premiums, because the facts don't bear that out.
Why do you think people are so... Why don't they choose an attorney? Like, maybe because they don't know? Like,
I think it's a number of factors. I think when people hear attorney, they hear expensive. They hear it's going to take forever. I don't want to deal with it. I want to move on from the claim. And that is the insurance company's strategy. There's a kind of a classic book in our industry called Delay, Deny, Defend. And it's a professor from the Northeast that studied this. And it is the litigation strategy of, well, look, I'll string these people along, pay them a little bit of money so they can get going. They're not just completely furious with us, but enough money to maybe hire a contractor, put a roof on the property, get something going. And if they want to ask for more, just deny and say no more is owed. And if they go get a lawyer, we'll defend it and make them wait out another 2 years to get what they're owed. And that strategy permeates insurance from coast to coast. And we see that, unfortunately, every single day. And I will give this caveat. When an insurance company does right by their policyholder, nobody's calling us. Nobody wants to involve a lawyer if they don't have to.
Right.
We rarely, if ever, get a call on the front end of a claim. We get a call 90 days in, where I give you that example. Contractor says it's going to take 300. Insurance companies paid 50, 75, 100, let's hope. And they don't know what to do next.
Right.
Then they call to get advice. And that's the unfortunate aspect of it is when someone's gotten to their wit's end. And look, the husband of a family or the leader of a family often says, I'm the leader. Of course I can get this resolved. And it's when they try and do everything they can and they finally throw their hands up and say, I don't know what to do next. And they get on Google. Maybe they're asking ChatGPT, what's the next step? And that's where they'll usually find a lawyer online and reach out.
If Batman existed and he created just a bunch of damage, right? Could you sue Batman? Would it be his fault?
Suing Batman would be tough. We got to serve Batman first and foremost. And,
right. You don't know where
he
can't go to the Batcave, right?
But yeah, if Batman comes through, or if any, we'll call it act of God, as the insurance companies like to call it. Yeah. If, God forbid, a plane crashes, there are exclusions, like there are terrorism exclusions now throughout these policies. But if
exclusions,
if your house is destroyed during a terrorist act, you're not getting covered.
Really?
That's right. Which is, it sounds like an absurd example, but if you live in a big city, who knows what could happen.
Right.
And that came in obviously after some terrorist attacks in our nation's history. But yeah, if something else happens, if someone drives a car through your house, if neighbors are shooting fireworks and a firework lands on your roof, catches fire, and all of a sudden there's a house fire in your house and you're none the wiser, that stuff's going to be covered.
Yeah.
If you're on vacation and a pipe bursts and your house is flooded with water, or even if forget about it, if you're not on vacation, if you're home and sleeping and the house floods with water, you're going to be covered. The question is not, are you covered? It's, are you getting what you need to recover?
When they're talking about the bundling, right? Like they're bundle home, auto, the whole nine.
Yes.
Should we be looking at what the coverage says? Is that, you know what I mean? Like how do I know I have the right coverage?
Yeah. What 99.9% of us look at is, it's called a deck page. It's the first page of your policy.
100%.
And nobody looks at anything behind that. And you'll know, okay, my house is worth $300,000. I've got $300,000 of coverage. I don't really know anything else on here says, but I see that number and, I'll pay my premium. The reality is those contracts, you don't get to negotiate what's in it. You don't get to say, I don't like this language on page 3. I'm going to need you to scratch that out. They call it a contract of adhesion, meaning they hand it to you and you're basically accepting it for what it is. You can modify coverage amounts, but by and large, there are some small exceptions to this, but by and large, what you see is what you get. And all those exclusions that I talked about, terrorism, for an example, long-term mold, if there's mold in the house and it wasn't caused by an event like a rain event, it's not covered. And there's a host of other exclusions. But yeah, you don't get to negotiate those. That's in there, lock, stock, and barrel.
So no matter what, like it's just, you got what you got and that's it.
Yes, in commercial policies and complex commercial businesses, there's a little bit more room to customize. But I'd be willing to bet if my insurance policy and your insurance policy, once you turn past the first page and you turn past the brand on the front, it's going to be 98% the same.
Tell me a story of somebody that you guys helped recently that you can remember that was just like, oh yeah, it's a memorable story.
Sure. I mean, there's so many of them. My brain is kind of flooding with options. There was one that stuck with me. We represent a New Orleans police officer who is a busy guy. He's got a family, 2 kids, a wife, and said, look, I'm exhausted. It's been 2 years since I hired Pandit Law Firm. I hired you guys a year after Hurricane Ida. I'm now 3 years in. They're offering, some amount of money. They're offering $30,000 to $35,000 at this mediation. I don't want to fight anymore. I'll take it. Now, ethically, if our client tells us to take it, we need to accept. In that example, the attorney that's on that case at the firm explained to the officer and said, look, I hear you. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do, but you have a great case. And they're doing that same process, delay, deny, defend, ultimately defend. They're still, even after 2 years of litigation, lowballing you. I'm telling you, you have a great case. Please let me continue to fight. Let's walk away from this mediation and let me do more discovery. Let me exchange more documents, and let me keep fighting for you. And he and his wife took a private moment. They said they prayed on it, trusted our advice, and about 6-7 months later, we recovered them over $200,000 in new money, and brought this gentleman to literal tears and said, look, I would have never believed we would ever get here. You told us that you thought we could get there, and sure enough, they can now fix everything in their home. And the insurance company knew. We treated them poorly. They paid amounts above and beyond what they needed to fix the home for penalties and attorney's fees, and so they could pay our fee, pay our costs, and have every dollar they needed to get their home back. But we hear this so often. People are just exhausted, and they're ready to move on. Most likely they've got their own bills that they've paid or contractor bills that they came out of pocket for. In their mind, they'll deal with a messed up house to just get back to, in their mind, even in their own money. And that's usually the mindset is, I'm out 25 grand if I can get 25 grand, despite mismatched floors, rooms not being painted, tile not being laid back down, a half completed kitchen, not the same appliances I had, just living in a substandard way, in a way that the policy says, I'm here to make you whole.
Yeah. Despite
not being made whole, that exhaustion, that psychological, emotional exhaustion, often leads them to take less than they should. When, but you have these shining examples of when someone trusts us, grins and bears it, and then gets that outcome. It's a nice feeling.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations on that. Yeah, I think goes back to the first question I asked about, niching down and being a specialist. Would somebody have had that same experience had they just hired somebody that does some moonlighting property and casualty, cases here and there, as opposed to somebody that knows it and goes, you know what? No, if you stick with me, we can really get that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. There are plenty of good lawyers out there. There are plenty of passionate lawyers out there, and I would really separate it there. You can be a talented lawyer, but are you passionate about that person's case? Do you have conviction about that person's case? And if you are passionate about it and you have the conviction about it, you can be a dabbler in this area, and I think you'll get a good result. But if you're just kind of choosing to do it because a bunch of hurricanes came in, your phone's ringing, and you're not passionate about it, you don't have a conviction about that person's case, you can be a great lawyer in whatever it is you do day to day, but you're probably not going to get them the result they deserve without those qualities.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Well, Raj, tell them where they can find you.
You can find us online, panditlaw.com. Our phone number is 504-313-3800. Someone's answering 24 hours a day. We're downtown New Orleans in the Hancock Whitney Center. We'd love to have anybody stop by. And I tell this to anybody, if you have questions, email us, call us. You can text us at that number. Someone's going to respond to you, because I view it as a responsibility where we're armed with this much information that even if you have a question, I'd love to pay it forward and get those questions answered for anybody, no matter if you think how simple it may be. That little question and having the confidence to know you're doing it right or you're going through the process correctly can go a long way. And so we welcome any and all inquiries, big or small.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here. That was Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by Leduc Entertainment. For all of your production needs, we got you, and we'll see y'all next time.